The wind howled through the narrow canyon, carrying the faint scent of pine and the ominous promise of a storm. Jacob, a wiry man in his 40s with a face weathered by years of hardship, adjusted the straps on his tattered backpack. Beside him, his loyal companion, Max, a scrappy mutt with intelligent eyes, sniffed the air before barking sharply. "What is it, boy?" Jacob asked, his voice rough but gentle. Max bolted ahead, his barks echoing off the cliffs. "Wait up," Jacob called, quickening his pace. As he rounded a bend, his breath caught. There, sprawled on the jagged rocks at the base of a steep drop, was a woman. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with dirt, and a deep gash on her temple glistened with fresh blood. Jacob dropped his bag and scrambled down the slope. Max was already beside the woman, licking her hand gently. She stirred weakly, her eyelids fluttering open. "Hey," Jacob said, kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" The woman's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her wide, frightened eyes locked onto his. Jacob pulled a battered water bottle from his pack and held it to her lips. "Easy," he said. "Just a sip." She drank greedily, coughing as the water hit her throat. "Help," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Please." "You're safe now," Jacob said, wrapping her in his threadbare coat. "We'll get you out of here." The journey back to Jacob's makeshift shelter was grueling. The woman's weight pressed against him as he carried her, her body limp and feverish. Max stayed close, his sharp barks warding off any potential threats. At the shelter, a small, hidden campsite tucked into a grove of trees, Jacob laid the woman on his only blanket. He built a fire, the warmth casting flickering shadows on her pale face. "Who are you?" he asked gently, offering her more water. "What happened?" The woman hesitated, her eyes brimming with tears. "Emma," she said finally. "My name is Emma." Jacob nodded. "I'm Jacob. This is Maximum. You're safe here." Emma's gaze darted to the dog, then back to Jacob. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for saving me." Over the next few days, Jacob nursed Emma back to health. He treated her wounds with basic supplies, shared his meager food rations, and kept the fire burning through the cold nights. Emma spoke little at first, but as her strength returned, so did her story. "I was pushed," she said one evening, her voice trembling. "It wasn't an accident." Jacob looked up sharply from the fire. "Pushed? By who?" Emma hesitated, her hands clenching the blanket around her. "My husband," she said finally. "We were hiking, and he said it was my fault for not watching my step. But I saw the look on his face before he shoved me." Jacob's jaw tightened. Why would he do that? Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Because of the money. My parents are wealthy, insanely wealthy. They arranged my marriage to him. I thought he loved me, but he wanted control. Over me, over my inheritance." Jacob's fists clenched. "And now he's walking free, thinking you're dead." Emma nodded, her voice barely audible. "I don't know what to do. If I go back, he'll deny everything. And my parents, they always take his side." Jacob leaned forward, his expression resolute. "You don't have to face him alone. We'll figure this out. Together." Emma blinked at him, her tears spilling over. "Why would you help me?" Jacob shrugged, his voice softening. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because no one deserves what you've been through." For the first time in days, Emma managed a faint smile. "Thank you, Jacob." Max wagged his tail, his bright eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. Jacob scratched behind the dog's ears, his mind already racing with plans. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about justice. A week after Jacob and Max found Emma, she was strong enough to sit outside the shelter, her wounds healing but her spirit still fragile. The three of them shared a quiet breakfast of stale bread and canned beans, the makeshift meal a stark reminder of Jacob's hardscrabble existence. "We can't stay hidden forever," Emma said, breaking the silence. Her voice carried a new determination, though her hands trembled slightly as she held her mug. I have to go back. I have to confront him. Jacob nodded, setting his plate aside. We will. But we need a plan first. You said your husband pushed you because of the money. Do you think he's done anything to cover his tracks? Emma hesitated, her gaze distant. He's clever. Calculating. He probably spun some story about me slipping, about how it was a tragic accident. My parents would believe him, they trust him more than they trust me. Jacob frowned. What about his life outside of you? Does he have any weaknesses? Anything we could use? Emma's brow furrowed. He's always been secretive about his time away from home. Long business trips, late-night calls. I never had proof. But I suspected he was cheating. Jacob exchanged a glance with Max, who tilted his head as if understanding the gravity of the conversation. That's something, Jacob said. If we can find evidence of the affair, or even of him planning to hurt you, it's a start. Emma bit her lip. How? I can't exactly walk back into my old life without raising suspicion. Jacob leaned forward, his expression serious. But I can. I'll get close to him. Find out what he's hiding. Emma's eyes widened. How? You don't know him. You don't even look like someone he'd talk to. Exactly, Jacob said, a small smile tugging at his lips. I'm invisible to people like him. A nobody. I'll offer to do odd jobs, garden work. Repairs. Once I'm in, I'll watch, listen, and gather whatever I can. Emma hesitated, her heart pounding. That's dangerous. What if he finds out? I'll be careful, Jacob said firmly. But we need to know what we're up against. Later that day, Jacob left Emma and Max at the shelter and made his way to the wealthy suburb where Emma's husband, Derek, lived. The sprawling estate was gated and immaculate, a stark contrast to Jacob's weathered clothes and lean frame. He waited near the service entrance, watching as landscapers and delivery drivers came and went. When a gardener stepped out for a smoke break, Jacob approached. Hey, he said, his tone casual. They hiring? The gardener, a gruff man in his 50s, eyed Jacob suspiciously. What's it to you? I need work, Jacob said simply. I'm good with my hands. Plants, tools, you name it. The gardener shrugged. Talk to the boss. He's inside. Jacob's first meeting with Derek was brief but unsettling. The man was every bit as polished and charismatic as Emma had described, his easy smile masking a cold, calculating nature. You're looking for work? Derek asked, his tone clipped as he studied Jacob. Yes, sir, Jacob replied, keeping his voice steady. I can do anything you need, gardening, maintenance, repairs. Just trying to make an honest living. Derek smirked. All right. We'll see what you're worth. Start tomorrow. Over the next few weeks, Jacob worked quietly, tending the gardens and fixing minor issues around the estate. He stayed out of sight as much as possible, blending into the background while keeping his ears open. He soon learned that Derek often entertained guests, usually business associates, but occasionally a woman who wasn't Emma. Jacob noted every detail, the late-night visits, the hushed phone calls, and the frequent trips to a locked study. He kept a small notebook hidden in his toolbox, jotting down times, dates, and snippets of overheard conversations. One evening, while trimming hedges near Derek's study, Jacob overheard a phone call that made his blood run cold. Stop asking questions, Derek hissed. It's done. She's gone, and the money's as good as ours. Just keep your mouth shut and stick to the plan. Jacob's grip on the hedge trimmers tightened. He retreated to the shelter that night, his mind racing. Emma listened intently as Jacob recounted what he had heard. He's talking to someone, Jacob said. Probably a co-conspirator. This wasn't just a crime of passion, it was planned. Emma's face paled, her hands trembling. Do you think he'll suspect you? Jacob shook his head. I've been careful. But we're running out of time. We need solid proof. Emma nodded, her jaw tightening. Then let's get it. Together, they devised a plan. Jacob would plant a recording device in Derek's study, aiming to capture evidence of his conversations. Meanwhile, Emma began drafting a letter to her parents, explaining the truth about what had happened. You sure they'll believe you? Jacob asked one night as they sat by the fire. Emma hesitated. I don't know, she admitted. But if we have evidence, they'll have to listen. Jacob nodded. Then we'd better make it count. Max barked softly, his tail wagging as if in agreement. Jacob reached over to scratch his ears, his expression resolute. We're not backing down, he said. Not now. Jacob stood in the dimly lit corner of Derek's study, his pulse racing as he carefully affixed the tiny recording device beneath the edge of the desk. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood. He had waited until Derek left for one of his mysterious late-night outings, ensuring the house was empty. Max had followed him to the estate's perimeter, waiting in the shadows of the manicured hedges. As Jacob exited the house, he caught a glimpse of Max's wagging tail in the moonlight. Let's go, boy, Jacob whispered, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. The next evening, Jacob returned to the shelter, the recording device tucked safely in his pocket. Emma was pacing by the fire, her anxiety etched into every movement. She stopped when she saw him, her eyes wide with worry. Did you get it? She asked. Her voice trembling. Jacob nodded, holding up the device. Now we'll find out what is hiding. Emma sat beside him as he played the recording on an old laptop they'd borrowed from a nearby community center. The muffled sound of Derek's voice filled the room, sharp and angry. It's done, Derek snapped on the recording. She's gone, and the money's ours. If you screw this up, I'll make sure you're the one who pays. Emma's face paled, her hands clutching the edges of the blanket around her. He really planned it, she whispered, her voice breaking. He didn't even hesitate. Jacob placed a steady hand on her shoulder. This is what we need, he said firmly. This proves he's guilty. But we're not done yet. We need to find out who he's working with. Emma nodded, her jaw tightening. What do we do next? We go deeper, Jacob said. I'll keep working at the estate, see if I can figure out who's helping him. In the meantime, we take this to your parents. Emma hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. They've always sided with him, she said quietly. What if they don't believe me? They will, Jacob said, his voice resolute. We'll make them. The next day, Emma wrote a letter to her parents, detailing everything: the arranged marriage, Derek's control over her finances, and the incident on the hiking trail. She included a USB drive with the recording, along with a plea for them to meet her in person. I don't know if this will work, Emma admitted as Jacob prepared to deliver the package. But it's all I can do. Jacob nodded. It's enough. Let me handle the rest. That evening, as Jacob trimmed hedges near the back patio, Derek's phone buzzed on the table beside him. Jacob's eyes flicked toward it, his breath catching when the screen lit up. The contact name read LK. Likely the co-conspirator he had heard Derek speaking to on the recording. Jacob's hands trembled as he memorized the number displayed on the screen. He finished his work quickly, retreating to the shelter to share the information with Emma. This could be the person he's working with, Jacob said, showing her the number he had written down. If we can connect them to Derek, it's over. Emma's eyes narrowed. Then let's find out who they are. Jacob used the laptop to search for the number, eventually tracing it to a man named Lucas Klein, a mid-level financial advisor who had been hired by Emma's family shortly before her marriage to Derek. He's been working for my parents, Emma said, her voice tinged with disbelief. No wonder Derek had access to everything. Lucas must have helped him cover his tracks. Jacob's jaw tightened. We need more than just a name. We need proof. That night, Jacob snuck back onto the estate, planting another recording device near Derek's outdoor meeting area. Over the next several days, he managed to capture conversations between Derek and Lucas, each one more damning than the last. "She's gone," Lucas said in one recording. "You'll have the money soon. Just make sure the paperwork looks clean." "Don't worry," Derek replied. "I've got everything under control. No one will know." When Jacob played the recordings for Emma, she sat in stunned silence. "This is it," she said finally. "This is what we need to prove they planned it together." Jacob nodded. "Now it's time to face him. Are you ready?" Emma looked at him, her fear giving way to determination. "Yes," she said. "Let's end this." Jacob and Emma spent the next few days preparing for their confrontation with Derek. Emma's parents, after receiving her letter and the initial recording, had reluctantly agreed to meet her in person. Although they were skeptical, the gravity of Emma's claims and the evidence she provided had shaken their confidence in Derek. "I just need them to listen," Emma said as she paced outside their shelter. "Once they hear the truth, they'll have to believe me." "They will," Jacob assured her. "And if they don't, we've got enough to make sure Derek doesn't get away with this." Max barked softly, as if adding his own vote of confidence. Jacob knelt to scratch behind the dog's ears. "You're coming with us, buddy. We'll need all the help we can get." The confrontation was set to take place at Emma's family estate, a sprawling mansion nestled in the Chicago suburbs. Emma's parents had invited Derek under the pretense of a family meeting, unaware that Emma would be there. Jacob parked their borrowed car a short distance from the house. Emma sat in the passenger seat, her hands trembling as she stared at the mansion. "You don't have to do this alone," Jacob said gently. Emma turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I'm not alone," she said. "I have you." Inside the mansion, Derek sat in the ornate living room, his polished demeanor firmly in place. Emma's parents, Harold and Evelyn Moore, watched him with a mix of suspicion and concern. "You said this was important," Derek said, feigning confusion. "What's going on?" Before Harold could respond, the front door opened, and Emma stepped inside. A gasp escaped Evelyn's lips as she stood, her hand flying to her chest. "Emma!" Derek froze, his face a mask of shock and panic. "You're alive?" Emma's voice was steady as she crossed the room. "Surprised to see me, Derek?" I thought," Derek stammered, his facade crumbling. "I thought you were dead." Emma finished coldly. "That was the plan, wasn't it?" Evelyn turned to Derek, her expression turning to horror. "What is she talking about?" "I'm talking about your perfect son-in-law," Emma said, her voice rising. "The man you trusted with everything. He tried to kill me." "That's absurd," Derek snapped, regaining some of his composure. "She's clearly confused. The fall must have enough." Jacob's voice cut through the room as he entered, Max at his side. He held up the recordings, his gaze locked on Derek. "We have proof. Conversations between you and Lucas Klein. You planned everything." Harold's face darkened. "Lucas? My advisor?" "Your accomplice," Jacob said, his voice sharp. He played the recordings, Derek's damning words filling the room. "She's gone, and the money's ours. Just stick to the plan." Evelyn sank into her chair, her face pale. "Derek, is this true?" Derek stood, his hands shaking. "It's not what it sounds like. Save it." Emma said, her voice trembling with rage. "I trusted you. I loved you. And you tried to kill me for money." Before Derek could respond, Harold called security. "Get him out of my house," he barked. "And contact the police. I want him and Lucas arrested." 2 guards entered, their presence enough to send Derek into a panicked frenzy. "You can't do this," he shouted as they restrained him. "You'll regret this, Emma. I'll make you pay." Emma watched him go, her chest heaving as the weight of the confrontation finally hit her. She turned to her parents, her voice soft. Do you believe me now? Harold nodded, his face lined with guilt. We do. And we're so sorry, Emma. Later that evening, after the police had taken Derek into custody, Emma and Jacob sat on the back porch of the estate. Max lay at their feet, his tail wagging faintly as Emma stroked his fur. I couldn't have done this without you, Emma said, her voice filled with gratitude. You saved my life, Jacob. In every way. Jacob smiled, his rough exterior softening. You're stronger than you think, Emma. You didn't need saving, you needed someone to remind you how strong you already are. Emma reached for his hand, her heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper. Maybe, she said with a small smile. But I still needed you. And I still do. Weeks after Derek's arrest, the dust began to settle. With the mounting evidence collected by Jacob and Emma, Derek and Lucas were formally charged with conspiracy, attempted murder, and fraud. The case became a media sensation, with Emma's survival and courage at the center of the narrative. The public hailed her as a fighter, a woman who refused to be silenced. Jacob, however, avoided the spotlight. He returned to the modest life he had known, now sharing it with Max and occasionally visiting Emma at her family estate. He thought their connection might wane now that her life was back on track, but Emma had other ideas. One crisp December afternoon, Emma invited Jacob and Max to the estate for lunch. As they sat by the roaring fireplace, Emma placed a steaming mug of coffee in front of Jacob. Do you ever think about what's next? She asked, her voice thoughtful. Jacob chuckled. For someone like me, next is just another day. I live moment to moment. Emma tilted her head, studying him. You don't have to. You're smart, Jacob. And you've shown you're capable of so much more. What happened to you? How did you end up out there, in the woods? Jacob hesitated, his gaze dropping to the coffee in his hands. I used to run a business, he said finally. A small one, nothing flashy. But I made some bad decisions. Took on too much debt. When it all fell apart, I didn't just lose the business, I lost everything. My home. My dignity. I couldn't face anyone after that. Emma reached for his hand, her touch gentle. You're not that man anymore. You're kind, resourceful, and brave. You gave me back my life, Jacob. Now I want to help you rebuild yours. Jacob's heart tightened. I wouldn't even know where to start. With me, Emma said, her voice steady. Let's figure it out together. Emma's parents, Harold and Evelyn, were initially resistant to the growing bond between Emma and Jacob. At a family dinner one evening, Harold pulled Emma aside, his brow furrowed. Are you sure about this? He asked. Jacob seems like a good man, but his background, it's not what we envisioned for you. Emma crossed her arms, her expression firm. What you envisioned almost got me killed. Jacob saved me. He didn't care about my money or my name, he just cared about me. And that's worth more than all the wealth in the world. Harold sighed, his resolve softening. If he makes you happy, that's what matters. Just, be careful, Emma. I am, Emma replied. And I hope you'll give him a chance. Jacob was hesitant when Emma suggested he pursue further education, using her family's resources to support him. I can't let you do that, he said. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, Emma said firmly. This is an investment in you, in us. Please, let me help. Eventually, Jacob relented. He enrolled in an online business program, dedicating himself to rebuilding the knowledge he had lost. To his surprise, he excelled. The discipline and determination he had honed in the wilderness translated seamlessly into his studies. As the months passed, Jacob transformed. With Emma's unwavering encouragement, he not only completed his program but began consulting for small businesses in the area. His insights, forged through hardship and resilience, proved invaluable. Word spread, and soon he was in high demand. Emma stood by his side every step of the way, her love and faith in him unwavering. Together, they built something neither of them had dared dream of, a partnership rooted in trust, respect, and a shared determination to move forward. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their newly purchased home, a modest but warm space filled with laughter and love, Emma turned to Jacob. "Do you think they'll ever accept us?" she asked, referring to her parents. Jacob smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "They already do. They see how happy you are. And if they don't, well, we've got Max to win them over." Emma laughed, leaning into him. "You've changed my life, Jacob. I'm so glad I found you." Jacob kissed her forehead, his voice soft. "I'm the lucky one, Emma." A year after their confrontation with Derek, Jacob and Emma stood hand in hand at the grand opening of a community center they had funded together. The center, nestled in the heart of Chicago, was designed to provide resources for people experiencing homelessness, like Jacob once had, and support for women escaping abusive relationships, like Emma. The journey that brought them here had been anything but easy, but they had turned their struggles into something meaningful, a testament to their resilience and their love. As Emma took the stage to address the crowd, she glanced at Jacob, who stood beside Max at the edge of the platform. The dog wagged his tail, his bright eyes reflecting the pride in Jacob's expression. "Thank you all for being here," Emma began, her voice steady despite the emotion welling in her chest. "A little over a year ago, my life fell apart. I was lost, scared, and unsure of who to trust. But in my darkest moment, I found someone who reminded me of the goodness in this world. Someone who showed me what it means to fight for what's right." She turned to Jacob, her smile soft and genuine. "That person was Jacob. He didn't just save me, he showed me how to save myself. And together, we built this place so that no one has to face what we faced alone." The crowd erupted in applause as Emma stepped back, her hand finding Jacob's. He squeezed it gently, his own voice choked with emotion as he leaned into the microphone. "This center isn't just about helping people," Jacob said. "It's about giving them a second chance. Emma gave me mine when I thought I'd lost everything. And now, it's our mission to do the same for others." Over the months that followed, the community center became a beacon of hope. Jacob and Emma worked tirelessly to expand its programs, offering job training, counseling, and temporary housing. Max, of course, was a constant presence, his friendly demeanor bringing comfort to everyone who walked through the doors. Emma's parents, once hesitant about her relationship with Jacob, became her strongest supporters. Harold often visited the center, offering financial advice to participants, while Evelyn organized donation drives and fundraisers. "I was wrong about him," Harold admitted to Emma one evening. "He's a good man. And he's made you happy. That's all I could ever want." Emma smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "He's more than a good man, Dad. He's the best thing that ever happened to me." As their work at the center flourished, so did their personal lives. Jacob and Emma married in a small, intimate ceremony in the same grove where Jacob had once sheltered her. Max trotted down the aisle as their ring bearer, eliciting laughter and applause from the guests. Standing beneath the canopy of trees, Jacob looked into Emma's eyes, his voice trembling with emotion as he spoke his vows. "You saved me, Emma," he said. "Not just from the life I was living, but from the man I was becoming. With you, I've found purpose, hope, and a future I never thought I'd have." Emma squeezed his hands, her own voice breaking as she replied. "You taught me what real strength looks like, Jacob. You showed me that even in our darkest moments, we can find light. And I promised to spend the rest of my life making sure you never lose that light." Years later, as they stood in the community center's bustling lobby, now expanded to include a second floor and a childcare center, Emma looked at Jacob with a smile. "We've come a long way." Jacob nodded, his arm around her waist as Max sat loyally at their feet. "And we're just getting started." A young woman approached them, her child in tow. Her eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. "This place has changed our lives." Emma and Jacob exchanged a glance, their hearts swelling with pride. "That's why we're here," Emma said, her voice warm. "To help people like you find a fresh start." That evening, as the sun set over their home, Jacob and Emma sat on the porch with Max, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. They reflected on the path that had brought them here, the challenges, the heartbreak, and the moments of triumph that had defined their journey. "You know," Emma said, leaning against Jacob, "I think Max knew all along that we were supposed to find each other." Jacob laughed, scratching Max's ears. "He's the smartest one in the family." Emma smiled, her eyes shining. "Maybe. But you're the heart." Jacob kissed her temple, his voice soft. "And you're my everything." As the stars emerged, the three of them sat in peaceful silence, a family bound not by blood but by love, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of second chances. Together, they faced the future with hope, knowing they could conquer anything as long as they were by each other's side.